Our community, AM 1310 The Light presents Legally Speaking. Here is today.
Good morning. This is Nathaniel Lee. You're listening to Legal Issues of Today. I'd like to thank our audience for supporting our show all year and the many callers who call in on a regular basis who are well informed. I think that our group probably has the most informed callers of any of the talk shows. They do their research, and I'm always impressed. Like, for example, the Brittany Griner situation was a matter that garnered a lot of attention. For whatever reason, some right-wing political opportunists decided to make that more of a political issue by saying that you basically trade an America who's not patriotic for like a decorated Marine officers. Now, our calling phone number is 833-653-3529, 833-653-3529. And then our call, of course, corrected that. He pointed out that Paul Whelan had a passport for 4 countries, Canada, the United States, and Ireland, and a 4th country, I can't remember, but also that he received a less than honorable discharge. There's like 5 or 6 type of discharges, the worst being dishonorable, but less than honorable is right above that. Dishonorable discharge means that you lose all benefits, and the other ones have some reduction. I'm not quite sure. You have to look on their website and they kind of tell you what they are. But it was really fascinating that our viewers was able to pick up the distinction. Now, the other thing, too, is that he had the person that they traded Buta for Brittany Griner, he had about 7 or 8 years left on his sentence, and she had about 9 left on her fraudulent imposed Russian sentence. So it seems like strategically that the Putin administration, they had set this out to use her as a pawn. This is coincidentally, though, my only problem with this is that they also started the war in Ukraine about that same time, as you recall. So it looked like that the Putin administration were planning ahead, and unfortunately, Brittany Griner was a ploy that they used to get some person back that they wanted. But unfortunately, what we have to do in the future to make sure that when our American athletes travel abroad, the places that I probably would avoid traveling, I know I would, are the communist nation. I wouldn't travel to China, Russia, North Korea, or any of these communist regimes that have these draconian laws and rules. Iran is also included, and I wouldn't go to Afghanistan, because what happens is that we see that they have some odd rules, and sometimes you get into problems when you go in those countries. Now, also joining me today is my superstar panel, attorney Milton Grimes, who's one of the best trial lawyers in America for over 40 years. And but he's in LA, and we deal with all sorts of issues on our show. And one of the issues that face in our community, of course, is the homeless crisis. We're a wealthy nation, and despite a lot of wealth in our country, we still have a problem with, from city to city, we have a proliferation of folks who just can't manage life on their own, and they find themselves from time to time in disparate situation where they become homeless. Homelessness can be attributable to a lot of different reasons. One of the young men that I went to college with, I remember very vividly, after I became a lawyer, I saw him on the street, and I was probably a lawyer, maybe 5, 6 years at the time. And he was homeless. He went to college just like me. And I saw him, he was sleeping near my building. And I talked to him. I said, "What are you doing?" And he explained the circumstances to me. And I listened to the circumstances. It was just a series of misadventures. So I reached in my pocket. I gave him the cash that I had, gave him my card, and made arrangement for him to stay at the hotel for the next 3 nights. And so he can get a bus ticket back to his hometown and, buy some decent clothes and so he can move forward in life. But his circumstances were so significant, so severe, I don't want to discuss it publicly, but the point I'm making is, so even people that are educated sometimes find themselves in the hole. Attorney Grimes, what's going on out in LA with your homeless project? Your mute is on, sir. Okay, we'll have to come back to him. But in any event,
Nathaniel?
yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I hear
What's going on?
What's going on in LA?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
It's funny you say the story that you just gave, because I was contacted by a law school friend of mine last week, and he was telling me one of our classmates and one of my chess playing friends had been homeless when he saw him about 7 years after we got out of law school, and he had fallen on bad terms. It's an epidemic, I guess, almost you could say, from the streets of LA that I see. Every day I'm reminded of it. I see homeless people in my community. I see homeless people when I go downtown to the court. I see homeless people on the freeway, underpass. We are not doing enough about it. We have a new mayor now here in LA. You asked what's going on in LA. We have a new mayor. She has sworn to solve the homeless problem, but those before her weren't able to solve the homeless problem. We need more space being given for homeless people. They have a few hotels that have opened up for them, but they still moving the homeless from certain locations that they have found some safety in, because I guess they're eyesore to the people who lodge or live there. So it's a national problem. It's not just LA, Nate.
Oh yeah, it's certainly, we have the same type issues in our city. So it's not isolated, but LA is probably one of the largest cities in the United States.
Yeah.
You're the second largest city now in the country. I know that area is probably the largest now, because LA area's got to have about, 30 million people, it seems like, or at least 20 some odd million. It's just a huge metropolitan area now.
Mm-hmm. A judge friend of mine, Judge Carter, federal judge in Orange County, and for some reason he kind of is involved with the homeless issue all over this Southern California area. He has been tackling this problem for the last 5 years I know about, because you see him in the front page of the paper doing something. But I guess the numbers are increasing more than what was expected, but they just can't solve it. I don't know the answer.
Well, in our town, we have trustee offices, right? And the trustee office provide a hands up when you're down and out like that. But part of the problem, though, is that it seems like it's a little bit more bureaucratic than what it needs to be, from my standpoint. There are so many people, and when they get down to luck, they don't have the access to the cell phone, the computer, the internet. And what they've been doing locally is that we have excellent services at our libraries, And I've had some of my clients, Milton, that are involved in, they get hit, they have injuries and things like that, and we represented them. And we have to communicate them. They have an email account, and they go to their local library and they can respond by email, and they check their emails because they don't always have cell phones and things like that. When you're down and out, if you can't afford food, you're probably not going to be able to afford to pay cell phone monthly dues either. And but what about this angle here? Have you seen any statistical correlation between people being homeless and there being an increase in crime in that demographics, or is that something that's not kept?
You asked me that question?
Yes. See,
Okay.
in our city, I've not seen a high degree of crime by the homeless folks. Every now and then we've had some erratic behavior, but by and large, I've not seen them as being a problem to our criminal justice system, at least locally. I've not noticed that. But
Getting back to your original question, I understand that the new mayor has declared a state of emergency to address it. That's why I said earlier she has sworn to try to resolve this problem, but it's been difficult. We have some mayors around the county of Los Angeles pretty much against homeless people. They see them as the source for crime and vandalism, and they have a harsh attitude and they have a harsh attitude and reaction to homeless people. But oftentimes people are that way because of mental illness, because of economics. They just can't, pay the rent. The next day you out in your car, and then your car break down and they put you out of your car because you can't live in your car. So you got to live on the street, literally on the street. And it's not a solution to put people in jail. I don't know, Nate. I just deal with this. I see it every day and I wish I could do something about it. And I'm busy working and trying to save and do something for the people I'm representing. I don't know.
Well,
Okay.
I was thinking that what we have to do is that the reason why the homeless folks initiative doesn't receive as much attention as it should be, and we have to start focusing on some of these societies ill, is that they're not the demographics who vote at 100%. So because they're not participating in the electoral process, they don't have a say in who get elected in government. Therefore, their interests are not properly being protected. And but I think it's a significant issue, something that for going forward in 2023, all our listeners, one of the things we have to focus on next year is that how do we reduce the incident of homelessness from the other folks in our society who are less fortunate. And this is appropriate to discuss this issue this time of year. We're in the season of giving. And, we know that people who are Christians, this is a ultimate Christian holiday coming up, Christmas. And, so from that standpoint, we need to start thinking about these type issues as we go forward into next year.
Let me say this, Nate. You have me thinking about a homeless lady I represented just a year or two ago, and the homeless man that was with her that she was involved with at the time. They shot him and killed him on the streets of L.A. and charged her with assault on a police officer because she picked up the officer's baton, and they put $1 million bail on her and put her in jail. And I got into the case and got that bail reduced to $50,000, and they let her out. And we found out that she had been, she was a crack baby. They weighed 2 ounces or 2 ounces when she was born. Never had a chance in this life, really. And she had some mental illness associated with her condition of being homeless. And We got her housing eventually, got her own apartment. Her friends took over that apartment. She was homeless again. It was just a rotation of homelessness and court appearance. And finally, the judge worked with me. He said, I'm not going to violate this woman, Milton. We're going to try to work with her. We get her another apartment on her own. Some friends eventually took that one over. Last year, they found her on the street, naked, dead.
It's sad.
The mental illness of this homelessness condition is rampant. We don't deal with our mentally ill people sufficiently enough. We lock them up. We don't have any facility to send them to for treatment. And when they're released, they just come back out to be homeless again. So it's a revolving door. And we do have to address mental illness a little bit more than what we do here in this country. Ronald Reagan did us a disservice back yonder when he cut out health programs in mental ill hospitals. So that's a part of this homelessness problem that we got to address, I think.
Well, I'm glad that we have to start the discussion on this issue because I see it from time to time, and I remember even during the height of COVID, and I would be walking down the street, and there was just large group of homeless guys sitting outside on the sidewalk. And I would walk past these guys. They, of course, ask for money and stuff like that. And I was saying, dude, why aren't you staying at the homeless shelter? We have, here in our city, we have a couple of homeless shelters right downtown. And they didn't like to do that. I guess the homeless shelter had some strict rules or something. I mean,
right.
And unfortunately, due to my ignorance, I've never actually went inside to see what's inside the shelter. I've donated to it, but never actually determined as to why some of these people don't like going to the homeless shelter. Maybe at some time in the future I will. But the point is that they were out there and they just hang out. And so from time to time, when I see these guys, I say, hey, dude, there's everywhere you look, there's help wanted signs. You ever thought about applying for one of those jobs? But then it dawned on me, as like what you're saying, is the reason why a lot of folks are homeless is because they have significant mental impediments that would not allow them to hold substantial gainful employment on a regular basis. And because of that, that's something that needs some treatment modality. But my understanding, as part of the criminal sentences now, do they have a component in our system now where people have the psychological assessments?
If you feel that a person has committed a crime as his attorney, there is a law that allows us to divert them to a process wherein they will be evaluated and given some guidelines as to what can be the proper treatment modality for them. And if they succeed at that, their crime will be dismissed or their charges will be dismissed. But that it has some hitches in it. And that is if you are charged with a crime of violence, say, that you don't qualify for that program. I think that's kind of ridiculous because people who have mental illness can easily commit a crime of violence. They don't have the judgment necessarily to keep from doing that. So you got something set up, but very few people qualify for it, in my opinion. I have a couple of cases where the people, I tried to get them averted, even with the psychologist court. And in the one case, the psychologist said, I can't tell the court that I truly believe this person will follow the treatment modality. I just don't trust him. I think that he will do this or he will do that. And he didn't qualify. So yeah, there's a system set up. I think it's rather hypocritical, but there is one set up. You got to be almost, it's got to be a nonviolent crime, and you're white, and got a lot of support behind you, and you may get through it that way. Otherwise, normally most folks end up not qualifying and with a conviction.
Well, thank you for that insight. Now, the next issue has to do with the January 6, 2001 commission. That was led by the United States House of Representatives, has spent a substantial amount of time in developing a lot of evidence. They've interviewed over 1,000 witnesses, and they collect a lot of evidence. And then the big news feed this week would be, of course, is that they plan to do some criminal referrals. Mm-hmm. And as everybody knows, any individual in America can report a crime or suspicion of a crime to any law enforcement person they want to. Do you think that it's significant in this case that the criminal referrals by the U.S. House of Representatives will carry more weight because they've now interviewed over 1,000 folks, collected source evidence, emails, text messages, cooperating witnesses, and how effective you think this type of evidence would be?
I think that when you investigate, in the past, when the FBI has done a full-fledged investigation, they go after the kingpin and the leader. That's what you want to do. You tear the head off of the monster and the body will die. I don't know why they don't go ahead and indict the kingpin in this January 6th situation, and that's Donald Trump. Maybe they will. What do you think?
Well, the things that amazes me is that it seemed like time to time that it shows a highlight of America's two system of justice. Mm-hmm. Even in Indianapolis, we had an African-American woman who attempted to commit fraud in the Payroll Protection Act, where she made some bogus application, did not receive the money. And so she got prosecuted and received some type of suspended sentence. Meanwhile, a white minister down in Florida actually received $8 million. And they had dropped the case until somebody complained about it. They filed charges just recently. And so you see this disparity in terms of how our justice system works. And so one of the problems that we had is that during the last 2 years, we had a divided government. The Senate was 50-50. And so in the Biden administration, I was really flabbergasted that they had so few appointments. They did well in the judicial appointment, but not U.S. attorney, U.S. marshals, things like that. Now, the reason this is all important is that the people that make evaluation of these crimes, they should change now because the Democrats, well, at least in theory, they have 51-49 majority. Who knows about Christine Sinema, what she's going to do, but the point I'm making now is that they have a majority on the committee, and so in the Senate, you should see things going forward. Now, having said that, the evidence that I've seen is pretty substantial. And so starting with the New York fiasco, for example, not just the January 6th issue, but the New York, they convicted the corporation, Milton, as you know, of tax evasion, was like 17, 18 counts. The corporation, which to me was a little bit odd. I've not seen in American history a lot of corporation that was tried and found guilty. It's something that I've not seen a lot of. Maybe you have, I've not. But one of the things that they've illustrated in all these filing is that Donald Trump fabricated financial documents for loans and things like that. It was a regular occurrence that I've seen the documents they produced, like the golf course in New York. On one issue, you showed us 55 million, and another is like 5 million.
Blowing clear.
And so each of those would
Get
be
that front real good. Leave it here for me because I gotta use it. That front real good. Front and then.
okay. But in each of these situations, what occurred is that Milton, those would be separate independent criminal acts. It's in plain view. And because of that, the fact that he's not been indicted, maybe he's Teflon Don. I don't know.
I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just that they think after his impeachments failed, and maybe he is the person who walked down Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and not be charged or convicted of it. Maybe he has earned that immunity from prosecution. It seems something strange that he had been charged with anything in the January 6th incident, or like you say, with this New York investigation. But so you asked me, what do I think would happen after all this investigation?
Yes.
The little people, the minions, the workers, the people under him, I guess, will probably be indicted, and we're all supposed to be satisfied with that. That's what I think. It doesn't seem as though anything touches him.
Wow, that's terrible. Okay, Carl, you have a comment for us today, sir?
Yes, how you doing, Brother Nate?
Yeah, how you doing today?
All right, good, Brother Motep and Brother Grimes. Thank you for taking my call. I'll be brief. You covered some things. First of all, we want to highlight and give credence to the judge in Michigan that's handing down time to those radical white nationalists that tried to plan to kidnap Governor Whitmore. 3 of them got time this week, 12, 10, 7 years. The one that got 7 years, he squealed on the main 2 leaders they've been tried and convicted, and they're due to get sentenced December 27th. So I think they're facing 28 years, 30 years, something like that. So I hope he gives them a good 20 plus. When I read the transcripts from the Detroit Free Press, the gentleman was in the courtroom, of course, crying, and, "Oh, I'm sorry, I had a bad lapse of judgment. The senator, please forgive me." But the judge wasn't going for it, which generally works for them, but it didn't work this time. So they're getting time, so we want to thank them for that. Number 2, we want to thank the prosecution and the jury in Texas with the Atiana Jefferson case. They came back and convicted the police officer of manslaughter. That was I think the only charge. It was appropriate time. He shot through the window. He didn't plan it, so I guess manslaughter is appropriate charge. But he was convicted. That's a high felony. He won't ever have a badge again. Hopefully he gets some decent time. Pardon me.
Why was he shooting through the window of her car? I don't remember the facts of that case.
No, it wasn't a car. Remember, she was playing the Xbox with her nephew in the back bedroom of the house. The front door was open. It was 1:30 in the morning. Neighbor came out to get some fresh air, saw the door open. He called the police for a well check. The sergeant came. The sergeant's on the steps. He does not enter. He hollered in, didn't get a response. He didn't enter. He was waiting to get more support, and there was no 911 call, so he knew it wasn't. He didn't think it was any distress. He didn't see anything out the way. This particular cop, 1 year, I think barely a year on the job if he was, he goes around the back of the house, side of the house, sees her in the room playing, and he sees her holding a shotgun, so he just shoots through the window and kills her. People got to understand, in Texas, I've been to Texas many times, you can walk around with all the guns you want to. They're worse in Indiana. So but in her home, on the castle doctrine, if she had one in her hand, it was fine anyway. Okay, he just shot through the window. He just shot through the window and made a bad judgment. So he was convicted, and hopefully he will go to prison and give more time than Amber Geiger got, which her appeal was denied. So she's going to have to do all her time. We want to thank the North Carolina Supreme Court that just struck down the voter ID law in North Carolina and the redistricting maps that came out. 4-3 was the vote there. So we do want to thank them. That's a hard fight going on down in North Carolina. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's a hard, difficult fight going on. The Supreme Court may weigh in, which I don't understand. That's a state issue. Drawing maps and stuff like that is a state issue. The state court should have final say, and I don't understand why the Supreme Court would even get involved in that. It's a state issue. And then lastly, I'd like to give thanks to the first president in the Harvard's 400-year history, black president in history. And the comments after this has been horrible towards the system. But Harvard has admitted that they profited from slaves and slavery, and they are talking about a reparations settlement right now, what I brought up last week. So hopefully she can help mitigate and implement and get this reparation thing on the go that Harvard owes. It's estimated that they may be in the estimated range from 30 to 50 billion to $100 billion. So hopefully she works as a sister and as a Black person and helps facilitate this process to happen. And thanks for taking my call.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, take care. Well, there was a lot that he brought up,
Yes.
but I didn't follow that case down in Texas, Milton, about the shoot. Yeah, you know, I saw on the internet that they say he was convicted, but you know, we were having so many of these shootings between mass murders that was occurring twice a day and police action shooting. It was impossible to keep up with all these shootings. And the big news, of course, was Breonna Taylor case. That case really was going off the track. As it turns out, it seemed like there was some grandiose conspiracy now in that case, and they have a number of felony charges. So, you know, you see all these cases all over the country, and the common thread is that the folks who are underrepresented a lot of time in our justice system, they seem to be coming out on the short end a lot of time. You know, Breonna Taylor, I see they settled the case for $12 million, but, you know, we have somebody's life that was relatively young that was taken away from her. And I'm not sure about the case down in Texas. You know, it's Atiana Jefferson. I assume that there should be some civil lawsuit. She was a 28-year-old woman that was you know, it's just bizarre that the first thought process is a shoot and kill before you actually investigate.
Yeah.
And I saw that the officer was found guilty of manslaughter and he faced up to 20 years in prison.
Well, Nate, you know, I think we're going to keep having these situations. I recently started reading Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers, and he comes up with this theory called emotional labor. And those of us who work in the fields where emotional labor are. And one of the things that he looked at was police officers. We have a young man coming out of high school, maybe doing 3 years in the military, and come back and they almost automatically qualify as a police officer. Some of the cities don't even send them to the police academy for 5 or 6 months. That's, you know how to handle a gun, you know how to tell people what to do. So you qualify as a police officer. And they put a gun and a badge on them, and they're 22 years old, 23 years old, and put them out on the street to handle the homeless and the mentally ill and people who are in a domestic situation and they're angry. And they approach these people with a lack of proper training. I think I was a little bit further away from what he's saying than what I was until what I read what he said. And that is, these people are not trained well enough for their jobs. They need to be paying more money for police officers. If we're going to use these funds, we should use these funds to pay people who are qualified for this type of work, not the ones that are unqualified, which is what most police departments have. And that means that police officers should be better educated, more mature, and more psychologically trained for the stress of their job. Can you imagine walking down the street and at one moment you're saving a baby or you're helping birth a baby, and at the next you're faced with somebody who's mad and angry about something happened on their job or something, and you got to deal with those situations. So you're not trained properly to de-escalate crises, and you're not mature enough for that. So his position was that police officers, as well as attorneys, we deal with crazy people one minute or some problem over here the next minute, and then we go home and we're tired. airline hostess, stewardesses rather, have to deal with people of various mental conditions and mood conditions, and they got to go up and down with that. Teachers dealing with some kid who's bad, some kid who's good, and they got to handle all of that in the same day. So I was probably more critical and attacking the police officers than I am now after this read recently of his book about recognizing and acknowledging the fact that policing is a difficult job. You know that. Policing is a difficult job, and everybody's not cut out for it, trained for it, educated for it, or qualified for it. They had a situation up in Northern California where I think a couple of months ago, they fired 45 police officers because they had failed the psychological part of the requirement. So we're going to continue to have, I think, the incidents we're talking about, police killing, especially Black folks, because they come in our community and they don't have a necessary regard or concern for the life. So that may be more of, I think anyway, not solution, but as a way of addressing this problem here in America, is to put qualified, trained, educated, mature policing out there.
I think you're absolutely right. But, here's what I did. In order to try to fix the problem locally, we started the process here in Indianapolis back in the 80s. The Marion County Jail had 1,200 inmates and 1,148 was African-American males, which is
right.
Terrible statistics, right? So what I did is that I got on the class action lawsuits. So I represented the Black police officer, Black firemen, and also I headed up the Black state troopers. What I was trying to do is eliminate one aspect of policing I thought was critical to our health and our safety. That is, I wanted to try to eliminate the racial discrimination elements. I mean, of all of the things that good or bad about policing, the one variable that is the worst of the worst is blatant racists, because they fabricate evidence. Well, racist cop, they fabricate evidence, they create crimes that are not there sometime, they file charges against the wrong defendant. There's a variety of reasons. So my goal was to eliminate that one element of policing locally. And we've been, I think, successful in the sense that our police officers now are better trained, and we still have incident, but the problem is that we've worked hard to try to eliminate that. We still have it, but it's not like it used to be.
Bad, right?
When I started this process, Milton, I remember back in the 80s, I was leaving a golf course and I got into this one area and this police officer pulled me over, right? In an area that was isolated, which is kind of odd, right? And the first thing he did was kind of took his thing off and had his hand on his gun.
Right.
Now, why in the hell did he pull me over? He didn't tell me. And so at the same time, I had my cell phone. I called one of my police clients and friends and put him on things so he could hear what's going on. And I didn't tell him that I had somebody listen on it. But what occurred is this whole stop had to do with the fact that back that year on plate renewals, the state of Indiana was late sending out their renewal license plates. I paid for it, but they had a computer glitch and they were behind about 6 weeks. And so my driver's license had expired maybe 2 days earlier. I'm not my driver's license, but my plates, my registration plates, even though I paid for them, but I've not received the renewal. And so he kept me out there for like 30 minutes and he did everything to try to agitate me. And it kind of pissed me off, but I kept my cool. And so he wrote a ticket, which of course got dismissed, but I was glad he wrote me a ticket because I got his name. He never gave me his name or anything, but he had his name on it. So I filed a complaint against him for police misconduct.
Right.
And back then, the board did nothing. They ended up doing something else. And so I was saying the first opportunity I get I'm going to sue this guy, because I know he's going to end up shooting somebody, but because at that time, our oversight board was politically corrupt. and morally corrupt in our city. They've gotten much better, but back then it was just terrible. So we had to work to eliminate that. Now, let's go to the phone and get another caller. Pierre Pullen, you have a question or comment for us today, sir?
Yes, can you hear me, Nate?
Loud and clear.
Here's a question I wanted to ask Attorney Grimes. I saw some prosecutors out there in California complaining that if you say you got 3 people that commit a crime and say one of the group kills somebody, in some states, I think maybe here, everybody gets charged. But in California, you can only charge the person that actually did the killing in the group. And prosecutors were complaining about that out in California. What is it? Can you explain that? And Nate, can you explain what the standard is in Indiana?
Well, I just did a motion for resentencing of a young man on that situation, and what they're saying now, unless you can show and prove that the other 2 accomplices knew and agreed and that was going to be a killing, that was going to be a shooting, then they shouldn't be charged with that. In the past, like you said, the accomplices was charged with the crime committed by their co-defendant. But now the state is required to prove that those accomplices who participated, say, in that crime, that robbery, had knowledge that there was going to be a shooting and intended to shoot the person. You follow me? And intended to shoot the victim. And
right.
Prosecution has the burden of proving that the accomplices 2 and 3 knew and had supported the shooting. You follow me? That's the law, and that should be the law, because I've seen situations where surely people who were engaged in wrongful conduct did not agree to the extent of a shooting, even though they may have had suspicion that could happen. The state is now required to have more evidence than that's a probable natural consequence of the act. They got to show knowledge.
Well,
okay.
Our famous case in Indiana was the Elkhart case by your former AG, Curtis Hill. As you recall, there were 4 or 5 teenagers broke into an Elkhart home looking for cash. And they thought the house was vacant. They thought the people out of town. So they were just going in there to take what they could, take a quick grab, a grab and run type situation. They were unarmed teenagers. Well, it turns out that there was a person at home with a gun. Well, I don't know if it was a shotgun. I can't remember the details. But the first thing he did was see these kids in his house, is fired his weapon and killed one. And so the 4, I think it was 5 of them, so the 4 teenagers who was there, they charged him, Curtis Hill charged him all with murder. And they were convicted of murder, and our Supreme Court threw the case out. And
Right.
they, rightly so, because they didn't go there with the intent to kill anyone. They were there to steal, and they should have been charged with burglars or theft or something. But in this case here, just burglary, because they didn't get to steal anything, or maybe breaking and entering. I'm not an expert on criminal law, but certainly they were overcharged. And so we had a case whereby a person got a lot of publicity by being a tough law and order prosecutor, but the conviction, it was idiotic and ill-conceived. So in general, in our country, you're responsible for a crime of what you do, not what you think a person might do, but it's what you actually do and what you can prove. They had no intent for anybody to die, much less their friend being shot by a homeowner or resident. So that's the gist of it. And that's our famous case.
So that's not the law in Indiana no more?
What you mean?
Like if a group of people go in, somebody kills the clerk, all three or all of the participants who went in to rob the store, the clerk got killed by one of them, everybody gets charged still, or no?
Well, that's a tough case because you have conspiracy, which a lot of time, or accessory, a lot of time they may give you the same amount of time it may give you the same amount of time as the person who actually did the shooting a lot of times. So regardless of whether or not they charge that crime or not, but because you have secondary type crimes they could be charged with in any event because they're part of a plan to go out and do a crime. But what do you think, Milton?
Okay.
I don't know what the law is in Indiana, but I'm telling Pierre that in California, I've had cases where, like in a death penalty case I had, my client and his companion went into a beauty salon to rob it. And my client was taking the jewelry off of two women, and his co-defendant was stripping and taking the possessions of the male man who was in there, who was the fiance of one of the women. And he found a wallet on the guy and opened it, and his badge showed. He said, "Oh, you're a pig. You're a pig, man. Oh, I bet y'all treat brothers like blah, blah, blah," and call him the N-word. You know, I bet you do this. Bam! Shot him in the head. Shot him dead. And
he shot the police officer?
He shot the police officer in the back of the head 2 times. My guy's 5 feet away, go shoot. And they leave there and they go commit another robbery of a pizza parlor. And coming back to LA from Orange County, and they're stopped and arrested, and they arrest both of them, and they charge my client with the murder of that police officer. He had nothing to do with the shooting of the police officer. He went in there to rob somebody of their possessions and money. And so the DA prosecuted him and charged him, and we went to trial on him being charged with the death penalty crime of killing a police officer. The jury voted that he had nothing to do with the killing of that police officer. He went in there to rob the place. He was not conspirator or involved in this crazy guy over here who kills a cop because he had a problem with the cop, because that murder had nothing to do with their robbery. They went in there to rob the place. They didn't go in there to kill nobody. He didn't tell the guy to shoot this police officer. He went with him after that because he said, "I was scared that he'd shoot me now, you know, and I was scared to leave him because he knew where my family, been to my house. I'm riding along with the next robbery." So I think you can see the separation of a shooting and killing of that officer, just like that jury did. No, he's not guilty of that. He didn't go in there for that. That was this guy's own thing. You follow me? So the law it tried even back then, Pierre, that a separate killing, even though you're in the course of a crime like robbery, may not be relevant to you. And now the law has said, when young people or people go in and they commit a crime that says 3 of us and we're robbing somebody, and one of us shoot and kill someone during the course of that robbery, unless you can show that they specifically went in there to kill this person and the 3 of them knew about it, or 2 out of the 3 knew that they were going in there to kill somebody, you can't charge and convict them of the murder unless the prosecution shows specific knowledge that they had and participation in that killing. That's
right.
The law.
And one last point. Attorney Grimes made a point, and it was relevant to something that happened this week. You know, they caught one of the Lockerbie bombers who made the bomb, and they're going to try him now in the United States, I believe. But I noticed that they won't say how they got him. They don't say how they got him. And to Attorney Grimes' point, I know Attorney Grimes know how they got him. They snatched him, but they won't say it in the news media. What do y'all think about that?
I have a guy who was charged in Illinois, Joliet, Illinois, for killing a police officer. He shot the officer 5 times with the officer-owned gun. He escaped capture, got to Monterrey, Mexico, where his grandfather lived, stayed down there 9 months. Mexico would not turn him over to the U.S. authorities because they have a treaty that says They do not extradite the people who are accused of a capital crime, a crime in which they could face the death penalty. That's what Mexico says. We will not turn over someone to you to be executed. The United States went down there. I don't know which section of it. I believe it was the FBI. I can't say for sure, or the DEA. I can't say for sure. They captured Manuel Salazar and they brought him back. They brought him across the border to Amarillo, Texas, or one of those Texas cities near the border there. And they turned him over to the marshals and the police officers from the state of Illinois. And they brought him back and tried him for murder. Several motions were made that was a illegal arrest and detention because of the way they went about it. They didn't go through the treaties. The courts ignored that. There was no remedy for that. Now, I took on the case in its second trial, but throughout the first trial, the lawyers fought the fact that he was kidnapped and brought back across the border, but the courts wouldn't address it. The courts ignored it. So yes, Pierre, oftentimes we will violate the law to do what we say is the right thing. But I think you should follow the law all the way through, even the state.
Well, thank you very much for the comment. To our audience and all the people that listen to our show on YouTube, Facebook, and on the 10 Station Live. This is our last show of 2022 because we don't do the shows on the Christmas and New Year's holiday. And I like to encourage each and every one of you to do something. Look out for the person who needs some assistance. Never look down on somebody unless you can look them up. And that we're in the spirit of giving and try to help someone. Remember that you didn't get here by yourself. Also, I like to thank our special producer, Dr. Sonia Smith, who always does an outstanding job for us, for all her insights and preparation for our show. And you, the listening audience, we'll join you the first week of January of 2023. Until then, Merry Christmas, have a new year, and go out and do something nice for someone.
Happy holidays to you, Nate.
Yeah. Thank you, Milton. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll see you next year, sir.